just going to wait a minute for everyone to have the opportunity to log in, and then we'll kick things off. Cool. So, hey everyone, thank you for joining us and welcome to our latest Women in DevOps webinar series, where we're going to be talking about the gaming industry, gender balance, challenges and trends loading. So thank you everyone for tuning in. I'm Hayley. I am a co-founder of Women in DevOps, and I'll be your host for today's webinar. And I'm joined by a panel of awesome, influential women in games who are very kindly going to share with us some of their insights and experiences as we hopefully look to demystify the games industry and take this opportunity to learn from each other's experiences. Women in DevOps was founded 3.5 years ago with a mission to help close the gender gap within DevOps, but also the wider technology realm. And we're here to amplify the voices of women and all minority groups, and we're very glad to have you join our global movement. I would like to take a moment to introduce to you Ari Waller from JFrog, who are our corporate platinum sponsors. They've already done so much for women in DevOps, and Ari has a quick message to share with you all. Hi, Ari.
Hi, Hayley. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Well, I'm going to share my screen really quick. Hopefully everyone can see that. And hi again, everyone. I'm Ari Waller, and I'm the Meetup Event Manager for JFrog. Probably one of the coolest jobs in the world compared, probably up there with the gaming industry, right? Very excited to be a sponsor for Women in DevOps. And it truly is a pleasure to be with you here today. For those of you who have not heard of JFrog, we're a software company based in the Silicon Valley, and we are known by many in the DevOps space for our for our flagship product, Artifactory, which is the world's oldest and leading universal binary repository. We have about 600 employees and 10 offices globally, and more than 3 million developers use our software tools on a daily basis. What a lot of people don't know, though, is that at JFrog, we have created free access to our cloud-based DevOps platform for the community, which you can get your hands on if you would like, and there's no credit card required or expiration dates or anything like that. And this includes Artifactory, so you can get your hands on it and play with it and see if it's something you like, as well as all vulnerability scanning and things like that. So I'll drop that in the chat box later, but something that I hope you're even more excited about in the spirit of what we're doing today is that we are going to be giving away a Nintendo Switch Lite to somebody here in attendance. It is something that I don't know what color it's going to be yet, but because they're very hard to get our hands on, so we have to make sure that we don't want to promise the color. But this evening for everybody in Women in DevOps, if you can use the QR code or the bit.ly, you can enter the raffle for the Nintendo Switch Lite. Now, I wish I could do the drawing live, but it's something where we have to make sure that from a raffle, compliance, sweepstakes law, etc., that we do it in the right way. So what we're going to do is I'm going to contact the winner within the next 2 business days. And then, of course, we'll make that person known, and Women in DevOps will also will be able to share that information as well with everyone publicly, because there really will be a winner. And we're just really excited. So looking forward to the panel discussion this evening, like the rest of you. And I'll turn it back over to you, Hayley. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, Ari. And good luck to everyone. Cool. So before we kick off, just to let you know, all attendees have been muted upon entry, but we do want to make this webinar as engaging as possible. So firstly, if you do have a question, please feel free to enter it in the Q&A box below. I will try to answer as many questions as we can. Any questions that remain unanswered, I'm sure we can continue those discussions in our networking session at the end. You will notice we also have Rachel joining us, who will be signing our webinar today. And just to let you all know that this is being recorded. Secondly, we would love to get a sense of who we have in the audience today and your background. So we're going to attempt to do a quick live poll. I've never done one of these before, so fingers crossed this works out. We would like to know, what is your current role? So just take a moment there, just so we can get a bit of an idea. I'm sure we've got a very diverse audience. I'm not sure if that's going to be displayed, but we will share that with you, the results after. Here we go. Cool. So we have a lot of varied backgrounds, which is great. I'm sure each and every one of you will have something to take away from today. So let's hear from our speakers. I'm joined today by Aurelie, Jola, Shelby, Christine, and Annie, who are going to start by introducing themselves and sharing with us their individual career journeys in the games industry, how they broke into the industry and why. Shelby, you had an amazing and an incredibly diverse career in the gaming industry. Would you like to kick us off and share with us your story?
Sure. Thanks, Hayley. Thanks for inviting me to be part of this. I'm really excited. And so I've been in games and tech about 18 years. It started for me when I was a young girl. I lived out in the country in Oregon, and we had a computer and my family around, and I was playing games, and I didn't really realize that other girls weren't playing games. And I loved it. I fell in love with games like King's Quest and The Secret of Monkey Island, and games that had this beautiful art and story and characters. And I just knew that's what I wanted to do. So I tried to figure out, at that time, there wasn't a lot of info about how to get in. So I decided I got a computer science degree. I started as a gameplay programmer, level designer, and I just started to kind of take on any task around me that needed to be done. And that's how I sort of branched out into being a producer, designer. I've been an executive producer, director of product, head of monetization. I worked at Pipeworks for 8 years. I spent some time at Roblox. I was at DNA, which is a free-to-play mobile company from Japan, where I learned all about live operations. We launched like 30 games in 30 weeks. It was kind of my free-to-play boot camp. I went to Warner Brothers. I worked on I worked with all the studios on a lot of big products like Injustice, Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones. I had a lot of fun there. And then most recently with my co-founder, Emily Greer, about a year ago, we co-founded Double Loop Games. And I'm the COO, game director. I do game design and project management. And handle the dev side of the team. And so I've really had a lot of fun having a lot of different roles and different perspectives on the industry.
Awesome. Thanks, Shelby. And Aurelie, I know that you've worked in the gaming industry for a long time. Would you like to introduce yourself, tell us your story?
Yeah, sure. So a bit like Shelby, I've been playing games my entire life, like for as long as I can remember. I always loved it. It was always like a great social way to interact with my friends and talk about cool stuff. But I never realized that, how they were made, and that was really a career. I would tell my parents, like, I want to make games, and then they'd be like, well, like, that's not a real job. And, you should go into management or whatever. And so I ended up doing that, like going into business in university, and then after a year, I sort of became an adult, and I was like, no, like, I'm going into the games industry. Nobody's going to stop me. I made some calls to like universities, try and see what sort of paths are available. Figured out like tech was really my calling. I jumped into computer science. Then I got hired at Ubisoft Montreal right out of school. It was awesome. I worked on like a bunch of different projects, a lot of different roles, UI, AI, gameplay. Eventually, I became a team lead for gameplay. And then about 2 years ago, I left AAA to go work at an indie studio. It's called Thunder Lotus. They just released Spiritfarer. I was not on that project. I'm on a secret project where I'm actually the lead programmer. So I do a lot of management as well, like the strategic level of how do we ship this project. And I also program at least half the time. So I try to find some time to keep my hands in the code. That's about it.
Awesome, thank you. And Jola?
Hi, everyone.
Hey.
My name is Jola Bolaji. So my starting games is a little different. I had a very strict upbringing, and my parents never let me play video games. So I would always go visit my cousins or hang out with friends or stay in the computer lab to get any access to games I could because I thought they were so fun. When I got to school, my parents wanted me to also get a real career. So I was studying computer science, but wasn't quite what I wanted to do. So I actually changed my major to human computer interaction. So kind of really looking at how people use technology and what people get out of technology and how we can better design tech for them. And when I got out of school, I decided to get back to what I wanted to do, and that was to be in games. So I actually was working at Disney, larger studio on some of their games as a product manager. And then about 4 years ago, I left Disney and now I'm at an indie studio called TikTok Games. And I run our live operations management for all of our mobile games. So looking at who's playing our game, how much they're playing our game, what parts of the game they're interacting with, and how we can tweak those designs to better optimize the experience so the product is successful and people enjoy it. And I love what I do. Very excited to be here today.
Thank you, Jola. And Annie?
Hi.
Hey.
So I guess similar to everyone else, I played a lot of games when I was younger. I can't say I ever really considered it as a career. I grew up in quite a liberal household. My mum's also an engineer. I played a lot of video games with my dad. Growing up, they never at all gave me this impression of like, these are boys' jobs and these are girls' jobs. It was just kind of whatever you want to do, that's fine. It's sort of in my teenage years, I realized that I wanted to do something with technology. And it was at that point when I started talking to like friends of my parents who always said, that's unusual for a girl. And my reaction was like, is it? And I started hearing that quite a lot. And that's kind of the point that I started to feel like I was making the wrong decision. But it was something that I was so passionate about, I kind of just ignored that. Games kind of felt like a step up from that, where it was like you have to be super passionate and you have to sacrifice your whole soul for it. And I just did not have the confidence for that at all. So I worked for IBM for a couple of years after graduating university. And then I kind of realized that I wasn't really doing something that I felt too passionate about. So I thought about what I wanted to do, and I realized that I wanted to work on something that brings other people joy, and video games brought me a heckload of joy, so that seemed like quite an obvious choice. So I started just looking at job postings, kind of seeing the stuff they're looking for, how well I could fit in and things. I realized that it wasn't totally out of reach, and then just applied for a role that I thought might be okay, and here I am. So right now I'm the only DevOps engineer for Criterion Games. We support the entire Need for Speed franchise. So that just came out, and then all of the previous ones before it as well. So it's quite a big job at the moment, monitoring all of those.
Awesome. Thank you, Annie. Thank you for being here. And last but not least, Christine.
Hey, I feel like I may be the odd man out, or odd woman out, excuse me. I have been in the industry for almost 30 years, but I did not break into the gaming industry until 1.5 years ago. It took me almost 25 years to get into this industry. I started programming when I was 16 with GW Basic on an 8088. And by at that time, it was Colossal Caves, folks, the very first text adventure game that ever came out. And that's what I did. I programmed text adventure games just because I loved them. I grew up with the older games, Zork, and King's Quest and things like that that just really obsessed me. When I got the Nintendo, the first console, when Nintendo came out, I think I took it apart within the first week I had it because I just wanted to see what they did. And if you've ever taken those cartridges apart, it's a small little memory chip in there, big cartridge, small chip. I was a C, C++, C# developer for, I would say, about 15 years. I worked in the HR field as well as the US election field, where we built the US election voting systems. And then recently, 1 year and 8 months ago, I received an offer from Riot Games. My dream job came through after how many years of trying. And that is what I'm doing now. I run 2 teams at Riot for DevOps. One is responsible for basically shipping out our products to our environments, both in China as well into the US and Europe. And I also manage a team that deals with all of our Jenkins installations, our Jenkins swarms, our pipelines, our Artifactory, if we want to talk about JFrog, and things like that. So that is currently what I'm doing now, and I am super excited to be here. And I'm hoping I can bring like an older perspective as well, because I think I may be the oldest one on this panel, but I'm going to guess.
Thank you so much, Christine. So whilst I have you then, so, 25 years to get into like the games industry, what advice would you give to those that are looking to break into the gaming industry, and what do you feel, it takes to succeed?
I really think the industry has changed so much from when I was younger. It was a boys' club. I will tell you that now. I did not know any females in the industry. When I was growing up in the 80s and 90s, we were still looking at women being secretaries, being housewives. I remember telling my dad I wanted to work with the internet. He said, that's just a fad. That's not going to go anywhere, right? So it was really, really hard for me to even get into the gaming industry. I had the C++ knowledge. I had, I felt that I had all the technology knowledge I needed, but what I didn't have, and every single job application I put in, they always were looking for the AAA game experience. You have to ship a game. You have to have experience with shipping games and marketing games. And that wasn't the experience I had, and I think I got kind of passed over because I didn't have that experience that a lot of folks on this panel have growing up in the industry, having your first job in the industry and start to get that experience. So I think, getting into the industry as soon as possible, really start to talk to people. There are so many people you can talk to and who are available and networking. A lot of folks that I meet come directly from LinkedIn, and absolutely go for it. It may be a little difficult, but there are so many opportunities out there for women now in the gaming industry. It's remarkable. It's just remarkable.
Thanks, Christine. Has anyone got anything to share on that in terms of advice to others? What it takes to succeed?
Yeah, I would say that I agree with everything Christine said, that especially when you're getting started, and I saw a question in the Q&A as well, like, who should I apply to? I think it's best the most likely chance you have is if you know somebody at a company. So networking is really, really important. That's definitely the way to find out about jobs that may or may not be posted, a way to sort of break through. And then the second piece of advice I would have is to always really have a portfolio of something you can show. I got my first real interview in games because I had a piece of, I wrote a shader and I had some code that I could bring to the interview. So sometimes those like code type whiteboard interviews can be really, really tough, but an interviewer would prefer to actually go through a piece of code in your portfolio and talk about that and have a more meaningful interview that way. So I always recommend build something, make something, have something to show and share that can really show off what your strengths are and what your passions are.
Yes, Aurelie.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think those are that's great advice. And nowadays I feel like game jams are super popular. And that's a really good way to show that you're motivated, that you can work in a team, accomplish something in a short delay. And so that if you can do a few game jams, that's already like really great on an application.
Awesome, thank you. I think Women in Games had their first virtual global conference, and I think like Game Jams was kind of a big part of that as well. Anybody else have any comments on that, or?
Cool. I mean, there's so much to say on that topic.
Yeah. No, but everyone's made like such valid points. So cool. So we're going to touch on this because I think this is important. Christine sort of mentioned that previously. Ollie, you and I were talking about this the other day around the perception that the gaming industry is a boys' club, that you might be discriminated against. What's your take on that? Is the gaming industry a safe industry for women? And what advice maybe would you give to women who are working in, male-dominated team?
So for sure, I think it's a question that we all have. And I mean, whenever I look for new opportunities, I actually like try to contact someone I trust there and ask them how women are treated at that company. So once you have a network, you can, sort of poke people, get a feel for it. And then other than that, I feel like as a whole, the industry has been really moving in the right direction over the last many years. It's been getting like really a lot better. So I think there's a lot of hope. I mean, it's becoming a field that's more, a lot more women are playing games. It's becoming way more accessible, like with mobile and everything. Even game making is more accessible with Unity. And so I think it's becoming way more open that way. But yeah, it's not perfect. And having worked at Ubisoft with everything that came out recently, I can't just say it's wonderful. Like personally, I didn't have any problems. I had a really great experience, but I also was never the only woman on a team as an engineer. There were never ever, which was super great. But I know that it does happen when it does, like it can be really hard for that woman to get a voice and to be representing your gender. So it depends really, but as a general rule, teams with women at Ubisoft attracted other women, and then we just ended up with like one big project full of women, and we had a great time. Like it was awesome. So I think it really depends where you end up at, and if you have the opportunity to try and have a woman around. Personally, I would try and choose that.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's true, there are a lot of companies that are, looking to expand their efforts at inclusiveness. So I think we're moving in that direction. Does anybody else have anything to share? I mean, Annie, I know that you are the only female in your team.
Yeah, I think it is really hard to look at some of the stuff that's happened kind of recently and not feel discouraged. A couple of months ago, there was a whole wave of allegations about different people in different studios, and it's really heartbreaking. Not just because of what happened, but also how it's handled by the HR departments afterwards and everything. For me personally, my experience has been nothing but positive. When all those allegations came out, the team were really supportive of you can talk to us and everything. I've had people above me reach out to me directly to make sure that I was okay and say I hope that you feel comfortable talking to me if you need to. So I think it is really important to be aware that these things do happen, but we should still talk about the positive experiences if we do want to attract more women to the games industry.
For sure. Thank you, Annie. Anybody else got any comments there, or?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I do want to say, in addition, I feel like gaming is and can be a physically safe space for women, but as we've seen in the past, not necessarily always, but I think it's also important to talk about how it affects your career and how you work, right? So one of the reasons why I like the company I work at is it is a very diverse, racially, gender, in many different ways workplace. That's one of the reasons I enjoy it. But when I'm at, client meetings, when we're working on projects or things like that, it is pretty much always the case that I am the only woman on a call where important decisions are being made, and for sure, like the only Black woman on a call. And so it's definitely something I'm always aware of. I think sometimes the people who are on the call don't even realize it because it's not their experience. But definitely always making sure to make your voice heard and to go places where your voice is supported. So at other companies where I've worked at, like Orly was saying, there are certain teams where women feel more supported, whether it's because there's women on that team or because there's allies on that team. Another thing is I have a really close friend from undergrad who works at a completely different game studio. We've never worked together, but we always make sure to link up because we both know what it's like to be a woman working in games and just have that connection and that support of someone from there. So I definitely think it's important to kind of make sure that you're constantly validating yourself. Like, okay, I can be here, I am here, I'm doing this well, and find ways to amplify that and support that in other people as well.
Awesome. Yeah, agree that that support network is so important, which is why we're here today as well, right? So anybody else, any more thoughts on that? Or we can move on to another point, which Jola and I were discussing the other day. And I know that a few people that tuned in today have kind of expressed imposter syndrome and, experiencing that, which can have a huge impact on our confidence, on our emotional strength. Jola, tell us about kind of your experience and what advice could you give to others that might be experiencing imposter syndrome?
I think the number one piece of advice I heard about imposter syndrome was from a woman who was vice president of product at Yahoo Games, and it was that she was experiencing imposter syndrome. And I remember I must have been like 19 in undergrad, and just hearing this woman who was like top of her game, she's a VP, she's been in the industry for 20 years, and for her to say, I am currently struggling with imposter syndrome was just really validating to me to know, like, it's not just this thing that's all in my head. A lot of other people are experiencing it. And I think it's something that we can take steps to actively work against, right? So one thing that I do is I keep a running list of accomplishments of mine. So maybe there was like a really tense time on a project or something where people needed me to do something and I was able to get it. I kind of keep like a little running log, kind of synonymous like my resume, but it's just of like little accomplishments that might not even necessarily be quantifiable in that sense, but experiences that make me feel validated, so that I can always remember, okay, I accomplished this, I did this, these are some of my strengths. And that really helps me to be able to remember that. And again, like we were talking about before as well, the support network is also really valid because sometimes you are your own worst critic, so you need people around you who will build you up. And so making sure to have those people that you can reach out to who will check in on you is also really important too.
Thank you, Jola. And anybody else, have experienced this or have any sort of tips for others?
I can say that I have definitely experienced this. And I think a lot of it came from, after having 30-something rejection letters from game studios. I mean, EA alone gave me 14. I mean, that company would not talk to me to save my life. When I did get my job at Riot, Riot does a very good job with imposter syndrome. And one of the things, and I did admit to them, I feel like I don't belong here. I feel like I can't keep up with these people. I mean, I am working with brilliant individuals. And one of the things they said to me that really just kind of made me stop was they said, we wouldn't hire you if we didn't think you were not supposed to be here. I went through 18 interviews, folks. I went through a ton of tests and interviewing and everything else when I went to Riot. And when I went there, they supported me and they said, if we didn't want you here, if we didn't think you could keep up with us, we wouldn't have hired you. We wouldn't have put you through an entire week of orientation. We wouldn't do this. You're supposed to be here. You are home. And they did say that, you're home. Welcome home. And that really helped me a lot. That, and the first time you find yourself surrounded by developers and you're talking shop and you realize you're teaching them something that they didn't know, and you realize you can learn. Everyone can learn from each other. You may not have the same skill set as they do, but you have something that's valuable that you can share. And I think that's when it kind of turned for me. And I'm like, wait a minute, I am just as brilliant and as smart as these people that I'm surrounded by. You know, they did hire me for a reason. I did pass those interviews. And so that was kind of my experience with it. It's definitely real and out there. Definitely.
I'd like to add something that for me, it's kind of tied to the previous question. In my first years in the gaming industry, I was the only woman on a development team of about 60 people. And I think both being new to games and being in a minority, kind of representing all women ever, it felt like sometimes in our discussions, I had a lot more insecurity about, am I struggling with this issue and this communication issue because I suck, or because this is actually part of being a minority in a group? And in going to GDC and other discussion groups, I started to reach out to other women in games and started to realize that these things weren't just me, and how I could start to address these issues and both feel confident in myself, but also to actually just start talking to my coworkers about the things that were uncomfortable and to start addressing those things. And so for me, the biggest thing was finding a network and being able to sort of share those experiences and figure out and just kind of get out of my own head about like, this is just me, I'm just struggling, this is, what am I doing wrong? That became easier to manage the longer I was in the industry, because I could look back on those accomplishments as Jola was talking about and everything, but I still always experience it. It comes up, and you kind of need to keep that running list and keep mentors and keep people you can reach out to kind of center and ground yourself. But it is something that comes up all the time. And one other thing I wanted to mention is that sometimes that comes from a place of, like the others have said, you don't look like everyone around you. You don't necessarily have the same passions and interests and skills as everyone around you. What I have found is that with the long view over years, that those things have almost 100% turned out to be a strength for me in bringing a different view to the team and creating games now that we were not creating 18 years ago for audiences that were not really considered 18 years ago when I started. So with the longer view, those things have turned into strengths, but at the time it's really scary and really hard, and finding people to talk to really helps.
Add a small thing. I think it's also okay to not have imposter syndrome. Like sometimes I feel like I have imposter syndrome about not having imposter syndrome. And then I feel weird. I'm like, should I be having imposter syndrome? Like, what's wrong with me? So anyway, like that's also okay. And I think it's important to remember that it's not like some constant feeling. It can come and go as well, depending on how comfortable you are in your current job. So like, even if you're having these feelings, it's not the end of the world. Maybe take some distance. And then the other thing that I found was really funny is like, it turns out a lot of us do have imposter syndrome because programming is super, super hard and like wide. Game dev is also like a whole giant field. And so we often end up seeing in other people like skills that we don't have. And so actually just talking about it sometimes can help. Like once I told one of my like lead engineers, I was like, I admire you so much. You're so good at all this stuff. And then he was like, really? Like, I feel really intimidated by you because like you're really good at all this stuff. And then we just like shared, like we just ended up giving each other compliments, and it was a really nice moment. And so I think sometimes just talking about these fears together can really help, both like helping the person realize like, well, how they are and how great they are, and focusing on their strengths, and then as well as you like just getting a bit more secure. And that's the other thing I think that I often do as a mistake is I try to be as good as everyone else around me, and that's not very realistic because we each are gonna have our strengths. And so sometimes, like Shelby said, kind of have to like focus on your differences as well and say like, look, I trust you for this topic, and then I'm gonna handle this other topic that I'm good at.
Thank you, Aurelie. Cool. So, Shelby, you and I had a conversation recently around, women playing games, and that actually almost just as many women do play games, as men. I guess, gender ratios may differ on like game genres, but there are also those that don't necessarily typically see themselves as gamers. Why do you think that is so, and like how does that impact the industry?
Well, like you said, there are a lot more women playing games than people think of when they kind of think of the typical gamer. And then on top of that, a lot of people who are playing games, just men and women, don't consider themselves to be gamers, but they may be playing games for an hour or two or more a day. And I definitely consider that to be a person, a gamer, but they don't have the gamer identity. So, my company Double Loop is really focused on that part of the audience, people who don't really consider themselves to be gamers, but are finding games to be really meaningful in their lives. So they play games to relax, to connect with others. And so I think it's really important to understand that this audience exists because there's a lot of meaningful gameplay and games that we can offer to them. And if we're continuing a cycle of make games for people who consider themselves to be gamers, then you tend to sort of recycle the same things over and over and kind of go down a niche. And that is a really important segment of the market, but there are just so many other ideas and viewpoints and gamers out there. So what I've liked to see over the last few years has been this real explosion in the indie market, especially of people who are making really creative art games. I love weird games like Papers, Please, which is really like a social commentary game. Stardew Valley hits all these people who might not have considered themselves to be gamers, and then in the mobile market as well. So I just think we all have a much greater richness of experience when we sort of look around and think about what we all like to, what other people like to play, and not just a hardcore gamer point of view. And that feeds back into the diversity of who's making games as well. So then it's really important to start bringing in people who don't consider themselves to be that gamer identity, because you start bringing in those perspectives of people who can come up with something that really resonates with somebody outside that audience. And it's not even like outside the majority, it's actually this non-gamer audience in some measurements is more than half of people actually playing games don't consider themselves to be gamers. So it's not like a tiny little sliver of the industry. It's actually a huge market. It just can be ignored at times.
Cool, thank you, Shelby. So like we've talked about finding a mentor and having like that support network. How far has the industry come in achieving that gender balance? We've recognized that, there's more to be done, but what are we doing right and what do we need to do more of? I know that, Christine, you support programs such as Girls Who Code. Like, what are your thoughts around that? And also touching on how to find a mentor. I know many of our audience will be keen to hear about that.
I am incredibly passionate about assisting women in technology, and especially in the gaming industry, because I did not have those mentors. I didn't have people to reach out to and provide advice. So now I kind of want to be able to assist those coming into the industry. I think that the best way to find mentors and things like that is networking, even social networking. I've had a number of people contact me on LinkedIn just to kind of talk about the industry, talk about what women are doing in the industry. So I think, LinkedIn and a lot of the social media sites can really assist with finding that. I'll be honest, and some folks may not like this, but when I was programming and really trying to look for additional positions, I went to Facebook. I followed all the major companies. I started going to game developer Facebook groups and indie developer Facebook groups, and just trying to absorb anything and everything I could do, the catchwords, what do I need to do to get into these organizations? And so those are some of the things that I did to try to, really bring myself to the forefront in front of these companies. So I think options like, Girls Who Code and things like that are just wonderful examples of what we're trying to do to really show, especially younger women, that there is something here for you. I mean, you can do anything, and gaming is one of those things that just go for it, just do it.
Thanks, Christine. Has anyone got any further comments?
Just kind of piggybacking off of that, I know at my own company, so TikTok Games were like an indie studio. When I started, it was 30 employees, we're at 50 now. One of our lead game designers now started off as a level designer who was just a fan of our game and engaged with us on social media whenever we posted our games, always posting comments, always playing right away. And then a position was open for an entry-level level designer, applied, had that connection of, you know, networking with our social media manager and the game designers on the projects that were played, and is now one of our lead game designers on one of our projects. So definitely any avenues you can use, whether it's Facebook, whether it's LinkedIn, whether it's your cousin saying they know somebody who works at a game company and you asking, hey, can you connect us so I can email them? Connections come from anywhere and everywhere. Definitely take advantage of them in any way you can, even if it's kind of, you know, putting yourself out of your comfort zone. Not all of us are people, not all of us are very talkative, but pushing yourself out of that comfort zone just to try and see, and you never know what can come of that connection.
Sorry. Yeah, I have a few things to say about that topic. The short first thing is that we don't necessarily, I mean, at least for me, I found that I don't necessarily need a woman to be my mentor. I like just my direct manager, if I trust them, I can really like do that, or even like a more senior friendly programmer that I get coffee with, like that, you know, sometimes you're just gonna have a good connection with some person, and a woman you might just not, because we're not all the same and automatically have a connection. So don't forget that, and a lot of guys are just really happy to help out anybody really. And then the other thing that sometimes happened, and at least at Ubisoft it seemed to be kind of a problem, is they were doing super well on trying to recruit more women, especially like going to schools, like at all different levels, like age groups, and trying to like you know, bring women into, well, girls into the industry, like telling them it's a real career. And then I think they did observe a boost in women engineers eventually. Like it's a long pipeline, right? But the problem is a lot of the women were leaving as like they were hitting some ceilings or glass ceilings. And so I think like there was really a problem of keeping senior women in the industry, at least at Ubisoft. And so that's a big question. I don't have a solution, but I think it's something that organizations need to be aware of. They need to like keep listening and keep trying to figure out if those senior women are okay, and are they developing, are they hitting stupid like bad stuff. Sorry, English is not my native language, so yeah. And so they really need to keep an eye on that. Like it's really important, because if those women are not there, then you can't really, like, who's gonna mentor the next generation?
Absolutely, yeah. It's not just about attracting women. You know, we want to ensure that they're retained within teams, that we have, you know, females in like those leadership opportunities and have opportunities to reach their goals. I wanted to ask you actually, because you've worked for large game developers and smaller studios, what are the main, you know, differences there that you see in terms of kind of the environment?
Oh wow, that's a big. Okay, so the new company I'm at had like no HR at all for like 2 years or something. They just recently hired an organizational psychologist to come help out. So that makes a big difference. Yeah, I would say mostly the small studios. What really surprised me after being at a big company is how few people were there. And when you have so few people, then you don't have as much knowledge, and like, you know, best practices for anything like marketing, HR, management, engineering. Like there's not much there. Whereas at Ubisoft, you know, there's like 20 years of history and learning and experts and like dinosaur people who have been there forever. And so yeah, that was like a huge slap in the face. Like suddenly I went from like years of experience, people that I could tap into, to like suddenly I'm the expert, and I'm like, oh, that's new. Who do I talk to? You know, like, so that for me was
A lot of people nodding here.
yeah, huge difference. Other than that, I mean, the nice thing about being on a small team is that, well, at least I'm in a leadership position, so I get to hire whoever I want and like not really answer to anybody, so which is nice. Of course, I still answer to people, but I have much more autonomy and in how I do things and how I organize the team. Where it's, you know, things are both faster and slower. They're faster in the sense that there's much less bureaucracy and politics and stuff. Like decisions can be made in one short meeting of 3 people. Whereas at Ubisoft, sometimes it's like, you know, it takes, I don't know, a month to get something approved. So yeah, but at the same time, in a small studio, you have so much fewer resources. So whatever you do approve takes some time to get made. So it's really interesting.
Thanks, Aurélie. Shelby, I'm sure that a lot of that will resonate with yourself.
Yeah, I've definitely worked in a whole bunch of different sizes of companies. For a lot of my career, I was at a company where I was at a local studio that wasn't enormous necessarily, somewhere between 20 to 100 people, that was part of a larger parent company. So the thing I liked about that situation was that we had, in most cases, a lot of local autonomy. So I had the ability to set the roadmap for the project we were working on and to make decisions. There was a lot of approval. A lot of times approval is more about the IP holders than a large company though. So a lot of interaction with that. And like Aurélie was talking about, a lot of resources to pull. When I was at Warner Brothers, if we wanted to talk to someone about back-end issues we were having, we could reach out to the other studios and figure out what they had gone through and get advice, and just, you know, that kind of peer-to-peer discussion is great. But as a founder of a small studio, you know, I got to the point where I wanted to be a little bit more the master of my own destiny. And so it's scarier and riskier in a lot of ways. You don't feel that stability of the large parent company who can kind of like be there, you know, through the ups and downs of the industry and whether a game makes it or fails. So you don't have that kind of feeling of stability with the big company backing you, but you do have the agility and ability to make, you know, prototype things with a very small team, make decisions about that. We've hired lots of senior people so that we do feel like we bring the experience of those large companies, what we've all worked on, to our small team, and we can make those decisions. But we are building everything from scratch. And so it's really, if somebody who's wants that challenge and they're ready for that challenge, it's great. If you're not in the right mindset for it, it can be really overwhelming to say, we don't have best practices, let's develop what we think they are, but we're developing it based on the experience that we've all had at the other companies and the idea that we want to do better in our own space and not be dealing with the, in some cases, like 100 years history of a company that's been around forever. So you do get to start over fresh. So like anything, there's trade-offs, but it's exciting and really great to be able to make what you think the company should be. And one other thing about that is when you're working at a very, very small company, if you've worked somewhere else, you can kind of see how everything that you do now actually sets the culture for what it will be 20 years from now. So I'm sure, and everything at Ubisoft, if there's like a way that things are done, you can trace it back to the first 5 employees and how they did things. And it's just really interesting. So we're very conscious of setting, what we do now is setting the DNA of our company for the time to come. And if that's something you're into, it's a great opportunity.
I would also say, if you have the opportunity, even at this point in my career, if you have the opportunity to work at both, I feel like that's really interesting. Because if you work at one, you have an idea that things will be different at the other, but until you experience it, you don't really quite realize the ways in which it specifically affects you. So I think that's definitely a thing that'll help you figure it out if you have the opportunity to do so.
Awesome, thank you. So we've talked about like different environments, different sizes of companies. Talking about more on a technical front. So Annie, you're a DevOps engineer. If we're talking about reliability, scalability, talk us through some of the technical challenges that you've faced when building infrastructure to support millions of players from around the world. You know, is that different? Is it different within the gaming industry? And yeah, maybe you could share with us.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the biggest issue that I see with numerous game launches, internal and as a consumer, um, is that I guess with everything, something works in tests, but as soon as you scale it out to thousands of people, all of a sudden it falls apart. And we do have teams such as system test who can test for hundreds of thousands of players at the same time. But there's always these things you forget. So, for example, if all of your players pick up the game on day one and they all try and do the exact same thing because the game boots up in this same way, then all of a sudden it doesn't work because nobody's tested everyone doing this exact thing at this exact time. So I think it is really important to plan for these kinds of things as much as you can, especially around launch time when you've got the most people. EA does also, for a lot of games, do a early access for people with the subscription service, so they kind of have 3 days before everyone else, and that's so useful as like a soft launch, so you can see some issues before they turn into really big problems and you can work on fixing them.
Thanks, Annie. Christine, have you got any experiences to share for us there, working within that DevOps space?
I can tell you that when you're looking at millions of people a day hitting your servers, there's a lot of people involved with the deployment pipeline and getting that information out the door. Riot is 3,500 strong, and I think our DevOps teams are very, very large because we do have we have several data centers and then hundreds of servers that are serving this content up. I really think that it's really focusing on that DevOps part, being able to get the applications out the door as quickly as possible to your customers, swiftly, effectively, and with the CI/CD and the pipeline, having that constant integration, constant delivery, constant deployment, it's something you are constantly working on because that is how you get it out to those individuals, especially the large group of folks that we do service. A lot of importance in the CI/CD.
And how has the shift been, doing that, working fully remotely now? I'm keen to talk about sort of the predictions of like future of remote working, if that kind of impacts things.
Was that directed towards me? I'm sorry.
Well, anyone really, in terms of, how things have changed to adapt to remote working, and if there's, different challenges involved in that from a technical aspect or.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think it's interesting for me because I worked at a very small company. We had that, open office layout where I could see all of my coworkers in one room. So when it's launch day, I can just turn and shout at QA and turn and shout at a programmer and they can shout back at me and we can all the madness of, is this server ready? Does this change need to be made? Et cetera, et cetera. That has definitely changed working from home. But I think I was actually surprised at how well it went because I'm very much like an in-person person. I'm not like an emails type of person. So I was actually anticipating that my job running live operations for my game was going to become extremely difficult working from home. But I've been really pleasantly surprised by how well my team has managed the switch. We have become over communicators. We're just constantly talking through everything on Slack. We will jump onto a Google Hangouts call to just talk something through. If it's like, you know what, these words I'm writing in Slack aren't going to make sense, but if I say them out loud, you'll get it. And so it was definitely like an adjustment period, but I feel like that adjustment happened really quickly, and I'm actually really pleased with how well it's been going, and it makes me feel better about the future since, for me at least, we're going to be working from home through the rest of the year at least.
Awesome. So speaking about the future then, where do we think the industry is heading? Christine, I know that you're a fan of VR, AR, where are the trends, and who has some comments there for us?
I'm really hoping that we are going to embrace AR, VR, just wholeheartedly. I really want a world where I can put my glasses on, go outside to meet a friend, and a beacon pops up in the sky to show me exactly where they are. That's the world I want, I want to play games outside with other people, and be able to augment that. So I'm really hoping that we're going that way. And with all the exciting stuff coming from, Oculus and the Quest and all of these applications coming out, and even the availability of the tools to program for these, Unity has some great packages and some great plugins just to work with the Oculus system and the HTC system and all this really great stuff. I mean, I'm hoping that we're going there. I see it happening. I know Apple is doing a whole bunch of stuff with this. Microsoft is doing a whole bunch of stuff. Facebook's involved. All the big players are involved. So I am hoping that that's where we go, because I think I got goosebumps. That's where it's going to be fun. When we can actually take our stuff outside and play. More so than Pokemon. We need a little bit more than Pokemon. We need another game out there. Yeah. Let's do it. Let's build it.
I think as well from the consumer side, there's been a lot of movement towards subscription services and cloud gaming as well. So I think from an online game point of view, subscription services seem to make more sense than buy a game once and then you have these servers forever. But I think that there will be a movement to how people buy and play games. Like maybe they won't even store them on their own hardware anymore. It'll all be stored somewhere else and you won't have to spend hours downloading it anymore.
I would also say that I think all the trends show more and more people are playing games. So as I was kind of talking about earlier, I think more types of games and more inclusivity of other people who want to play in different ways and play different viewpoints, as well as integrating social experiences into everything we do. Animal Crossing, for example, is massively popular with everybody, and the game itself doesn't even really facilitate easy social, and yet people are on subreddits sharing their codes, sharing their art, sharing their worlds, and just doing it kind of in spite of what the game supports. So I think that's what people really want, and the games are going to continue moving in that way, is ways to express yourself and hang out with your friends.
Awesome. So the chat has been going off, so it seems like everyone's really interacting. I'm really sorry that I haven't managed to answer all of these questions that have come in, but we've had a few that have kind of come in around. One from Maria. I hear from a lot of women that they don't want to apply for jobs in this industry because they don't have a track record in gaming, or they don't consider themselves players, even though they have many talents that could be super valid. So if anyone has, it's not directed at anyone in particular, to all panelists, what are your thoughts on this?
I do have something to say about that. It's especially like big companies like Ubisoft. Game dev needs engineers in like everything you can think of, every specialty, like AI, user interface, optimization, like assembly language, whatever, like networking, graphics. These are teams of I don't know, like sometimes 1,000 people. So depending on the company, I mean, we're an indie company. We're looking for people who know more about the games and have experience. Usually, just because we're so few. So, but big companies will hire larger, in my opinion.
And I think it's just being the first step, being open to explore new territories, right? Cool. So that's all we've got time for the panel discussion, but there's lots of questions that I hope that we can continue in our virtual networking session. There is a link, it's a separate link, it's in the chat box for those that want to join us. It's going to be for 30 minutes. We're going to have some breakout rooms. So I hope to see you all there, and thank you so much to all of our panelists and everyone that's tuned in. And yeah, we look forward to continuing those discussions. Thank you for supporting Women in DevOps.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
you.